Good morning. It's time. Chapter 11. All right. So, oh no, we're on 12. Yesterday was 11. So, 12 is make failure your best friend. The things which hurt instruct. Benjamin Franklin. The idea that you can make failure your best friend may seem odd to you, but the truth of the matter is that failure is either your friend or your enemy, and you are the one who chooses which it is. If you play a dirge every time you fail, then failure will remain your enemy. But if you determine to learn from your failures, then you actually benefit from them, and that makes failure your friend. If you repeatedly use your failures as springboards to success, then failure can become your best friend. Let me show you what I mean. Embracing tragedy. How would you feel about an incident that cost you your nose, half your right arm, and all the fingers on your left hand? I'm guessing that you wouldn't have positive feelings. But that's what happened to Dr. Beck Weathers, and he sees that loss as the defining event in his life, the event that turned everything around for him. Would I like to have my hands back? He said in an interview on CBS Evening News. Sure. Would I like to have my hands back enough to go back to who I was? No. What event would cause a man to willingly embrace such a drastic disability? The answer can be found on Mount Everest. You see, Beck Weathers was one of the people on that peak during the now famous incident in 1996 when a blizzard cost 12 people their lives. No ordinary mountaintop experience. Weathers was 49 years old when he ascended Everest. At that point, he had been a mountain climber for 10 years, and it consumed him. He acknowledges, I regret I regret the time taken away from my family, from my wife and two children. There's a large dose of selfishness involved in such an activity. I realized I was defining myself by climbing and not dealing with the rest of my life. It's an excessive goal and it never ends. You get about one day of happiness and then you're planning your next trip. Weathers always spent a lot of time in preparation for his next trip. Before Everest, he had scaled 6 of the 7 summits, the highest mountains on the continents, and for each climb, he underwent a grueling training regimen. For the Everest climb, Weathers signed on with an expedition led by New Zealander Rob Hall. Before the team got to the high camp at 26,000 feet, Weathers was doing fine despite the difficult conditions, bitter cold, and one-third of the oxygen present at sea level. But as he ascended the peak on May 10th, Weathers realized he was in trouble. Some years before, he had undergone keratotomy surgery to correct his vision. As he went up the mountain, the altitude caused the lenses in his eyes to flatten out, and that made him blind. Left for dead. At the time, the wisest decision seemed to be for Weathers to wait to where he was, then rejoin the crew as they came back down from the summit. But Weathers' disappointment was soon overshadowed by nightmarish weather conditions. A freak blizzard rapidly enveloped the mountain, dropping the temperature to about 50 degrees below zero and increasing winds to 70 miles per hour. The storm made everyone scramble for survival. As that happened, Weathers was left behind on the mountain. Hours passed, and he lapsed into a hypothermic coma. Fellow climbers searched for Weathers for hours, and early in the morning on May 11th, they found him. He was covered with ice and barely breathing. They knew he would die, so they left him where he was, returned to camp, and radioed to his wife that he was dead. What? No person has ever come out of a hypothermic coma and survived, except Beck Weathers. Somehow he revived, got up, found his way, and staggered back into camp. His jacket was open, his face was black beyond recognition with frostbite, and his exposed right arm was marble white and frozen upright in front of him. Resurrection. Even after his miraculous return to camp, nobody thought Weathers would survive, but he kept pulling through. Back home in Dallas, he received medical attention. He underwent 10 surgeries. They amputated the fingers on his left hand, amputated his right arm near the elbow, and reconstructed a new nose using tissue from other parts of his body. Through it all, Weathers went through a radical learning process. He believes he traded his hands for something more valuable, lessons about himself, his values, and life. He admits, I'm probably a much happier person now having gone through what I've gone through. I have a different set of priorities. You never know who you are and what you are until you've really been tested. You gain a whole lot more from having failure kicked up around your ears than success could ever teach you. Beck Weathers' attitude reflects more than just gratitude for surviving a tragedy that should have killed him. He displays a teachability that has allowed him to change his life for the better. He has failed forward by making hardship his best friend. It's a mindset. Fortunately, you don't have to be left for dead on top of the world's highest mountain to become teachable and learn how to make failure your friend. You can do it from the safety of your own home. All it requires is the right attitude. Your attitude toward failure determines your altitude after failure. Ooh, I need to read that again. Your attitude toward failure determines your altitude after failure. Some people never understand that. For example, John H. Holliday, the founder and editor of the Indianapolis News, stormed out of his office one day in search of the person who had spelled height as height without the E. When a worker checked the original copy and explained that Holliday himself had been the one who did it, the editor's response was, "Well, if that's the way I spelled it, that has to be right." The paper misspelled the word his way for the next 30 years. As Louis Armstrong insightfully quipped, there are some people that if they don't know, you can't tell them. Teachability is an attitude, a mindset that says, no matter how much I know or think I know, I can learn from this situation. That kind of thinking can help you turn adversity into advantage. Excuse me. It can make you a winner even during the most difficult circumstances. Sidney Harris sums up the elements of a teachable mindset. A winner knows how much he still has to learn, even when he is considered an expert by others. A loser wants to be considered an expert by others before he has learned enough to know how little he knows. I feel like I need to read that one again. A winner knows how much he still has to learn, even when he is considered an expert by others. A loser wants to be considered an expert by others before he has learned enough to know how little he knows. Okay, so Jim Zablowski writes, contrary to popular belief, I consider failure a necessity in business. If you're not failing at least 5 times a day, you're probably not doing enough. The more you do, the more you fail. The more you fail, the more you learn. The more you learn, the better you get. The operative word here is learn. If you repeat the same mistake 2 or 3 times, you are not learning from it. You must learn from your mistakes and from the mistakes of others before you. The ability to learn from mistakes has value not just in business, but in all aspects of life. If you live to learn, then you will really learn to live. How to learn from your failures and mistakes. William Bolitho distinguishes between a sensible person and a foolish one. The most important thing in life is not to capitalize on our gains. Any fool can do that. The really important thing is to profit from your losses. That requires intelligence, and it makes the difference between a man of sense and a fool. Anyone can make failure a friend by maintaining a teachable attitude and using a strategy for learning from failure. To turn losses into profits, ask the following questions every time you face adversity. Number 1, what caused the failure? What caused the failure? The situation, someone else, or self? You cannot find out what you can do unless you do all you can to find out what went wrong. So that's where you need to start. If you no longer personalize failure, as I suggested in chapter 3, then it becomes easier to sort things out. Where did things break down? Were you in a no-win situation? Did another person create the problem? Did you make a mistake? When Beck Weathers examined his Mount Everest experience after the fact, he determined he had made mistakes that led to his failure. He explained, when you're up that far, you get high altitude stupid. Always begin the learning process by trying to identify the cause of a problem. Number 2, was what happened truly a failure, or did I just fall short? You need to determine if what happened was really a failure. What you think is your fault may have been an attempt to fulfill unrealistic expectations. It doesn't matter whether you place them on yourself or someone else does. If a goal is unrealistic and you miss it, that is not a failure. To give you a better perspective on this, let me tell you a story that President Reagan told before he left office. It's about Three Musketeers, author Alexander Dumas. Hi, Shannon. Hi, Shannon.
Hello. I have my camera off because I'm going to be getting dressed.
You're fine. I'll keep reading. All right. So Alexander Dumas, the novelist and a friend had a heated argument, and one challenged the other to a duel. Both Dumas and his friend were expert marksmen, and they feared that if they proceeded with the duel, both would die. So they decided to draw straws to determine which of them would shoot himself. Dumas picked the short straw. With a sigh, he picked up his pistol, walked into the library, and closed the door, leaving behind him a group of worried friends. After a few moments, the loud report of a pistol shot echoed from the library. His friends immediately charged into the room, and there stood Dumas with the pistol still smoking in his hand. An amazing thing just happened, said Dumas. I missed. As you examine your problems, try to be like Dumas. Don't allow an unrealistic expectation to kill you. Number three, what successes are contained in the failure? An old saying states, the gem cannot be polished without friction, nor man perfected without trials. No matter what kind of failure you experience, there is always a potential jewel of success contained in it. Sometimes it may be difficult to find, but you can discover it if you're willing to look for it. My friend Warren Wiersbe says, a realist is an idealist who has gone through the fire and been purified. A skeptic is an idealist who has gone through the fire and been burned. Interesting. Don't allow the fire of adversity to make you a skeptic. Allow it to purify you. Don't do that right now. Number four, what can I learn from what happened? I enjoy reading the comic strip Peanuts by Charles Schulz. In one of my favorites, Charlie Brown is at the beach building a beautiful sandcastle. As he stands back to admire his work, it is suddenly consumed by a huge wave. Looking at the smooth sand mound that had been his creation a moment before, he says, there must be a lesson here, but I don't know what it is. That's the way many people approach adversity. They are so consumed by the events that they become bewildered and miss the whole learning experience. But there's always a way to learn from failures and mistakes. Poet Lord Byron was right when he stated, adversity is the first path to truth. Restaurateur Wolfgang Puck says, I learned more from the one restaurant that didn't work than from all the ones that were successes. And success is something he knows a lot about. He owns 5 critically acclaimed restaurants in California, Spago Chinois on Main, Postrio, the Eureka Brewery, and Granita. And he has also opened restaurants in Chicago, Las Vegas, and Tokyo. Probably a lot more since then, too. I think there's one in San Antonio. It's difficult to give general guidelines about how to learn from mistakes because every situation is different. But if you maintain a teachable attitude as you approach the process and try to learn anything you can about what you could do differently, you will improve yourself. When a person has the right mindset, every obstacle introduces him to himself. All right, number five. Am I grateful for the experience? One way to maintain a teachable mindset is to cultivate an attitude of gratitude, and that's possible even in the face of a huge disappointment. For example, American sprinter Eddie Hart missed a preliminary heat for the 100-meter sprint in the 1972 Olympics in Munich. As a result, he lost his chance to win an individual gold medal. But his perspective on the experience was good. He said, everything you pursue, you won't always attain. That's probably the most important lesson I learned from missing that race. There are times in life when you may not get the raise you want, the job you want. You have to learn to live with your defeats. And athletics are valuable because they're all about winning and losing. Before you can actually be a good winner, you have to know how to lose. Hart was grateful for the medal he received as a member of the relay team and for the lesson it taught him about living with defeats. As you come away from a failure, try to cultivate a similar sense of gratitude. Number six, how can I turn this into a success? Author William Marston writes, if there is any single factor that makes for success in living, it is the ability to draw dividends from defeat. Every success I know has been reached because the person was able to analyze defeat and actually profit from it in the next undertaking. Determining what went wrong in a situation has value, but taking that analysis another step and figuring out how to use it to your benefit is the real difference maker when it comes to failing forward. Sometimes the benefit comes from learning something that will help you avoid smaller mistakes in the future. Other times it is a serendipitous discovery, such as Edison's phonograph or Sean Benn's smokeless gunpowder. If you're willing to try, you can often salvage something of value from any disaster. Number 7, who can help me with this issue? People say there are two kinds of learning: experience, which is gained from your own mistakes, and wisdom, which is learned from the mistakes of others. I recommend that you learn from the mistakes of others as much as possible. Learning from your failures is always easier with the help of a wise counselor. After making huge blunders, I've asked many people for advice: my dad, Jack Hayford, Elmer Towns, and my wife Margaret, who is always willing to share her perspective of my blunders with me. Seeking advice from the right person is important. I heard a story about a newly appointed public servant who was setting himself up in his new office. As he sat at his desk for the first time, he discovered that his predecessor had left him 3 envelopes along with instructions that they should be opened only in times of distress. Before long, the man was in trouble with the press, so he decided to open the first envelope. The note said, "Blame your predecessor." So that's what he did. For a while, things went smoothly, but a few months later, he was in trouble again, so he opened the second envelope. The note said, "Reorganize." So that's what he did. That bought him more time, but because he had never really resolved any of the issues that were causing him problems, he ended up in trouble again, and this time it was even greater than before. In desperation, he opened the last envelope. The note inside read, "Prepare 3 envelopes." Seek advice, but make sure it's from someone who has successfully handled his failures. 8. Where do I go from here? Once you've done all the thinking, you've got to figure out what to do next. In their book, Everyone's a Coach, Don Shula and Ken Blanchard state, learning is defined as a change in behavior. You haven't learned a thing until you can take action and use it. My own mountain to climb. When you are able to learn from any bad experience and thereby turn it into a good experience, you make a major transition in life. For years, I've taught something that I think gives useful insight on the subject of change. People change when they hurt enough that they have to, learn enough that they want to, and receive enough that they are able to. That's true. I learned the truth of that statement on a whole new level on December 18th, 1998. While at my company's Christmas party, I felt an excruciating pain in my chest and I went down for the count. I suffered a serious heart attack. By the way, a mild heart attack is when it's yours. A serious heart attack is when it's mine. Honestly, though, I thought I wasn't going to make it that night. And my doctors later told me that if I'd had the experience 4 years ago, it would have killed me. Cardiologists didn't possess the technology that saved my life until very recently. What I've gained. My heart attack was a painful and surprising experience, but I feel that God was very good to me in that process. Several excellent physicians rallied around me and made it possible for me not only to survive, but also to avoid any permanent heart damage. And I've learned a lot from it. For example, when it comes to telling the important people in your life how much you love them, you can never do it often enough. I believe my work on earth is not yet finished, and God has spared me so that I can complete it. I must change my living habits for the sake of my health, the quality of my life, and the impact I desire to make in the future. The cardiologist Dr. Marshall told me that men who survive an early heart attack and learn from it live longer and healthier lives than those who never suffer a heart attack. I am determined to learn from the experience. I changed my diet. I exercise every day and strive to live a more balanced life. Mark Twain's comment was true. The only way to keep your health is to eat what you don't want, drink what you don't like, and do what you'd rather not. I have to admit that it's sometimes a struggle, but I'm persevering. As I write this, it has been over a year since the heart attack, and I have not cheated on my diet or exercise program, and I won't. The changes I've made are permanent. I've taken to heart Jim Rohn's comment: don't let your learning lead to knowledge, let your learning lead to action. I believe the action I'm taking now will enable me to enjoy my wife, children, and future grandchildren, and it will allow me to continue my mission for decades that I would have otherwise missed. You don't need to suffer a heart attack or be caught in a blizzard on Mount Everest to make failure your best friend. All you have to do is to maintain a teachable heart and be eager to learn every time you fail. All right, so your 12th step to failing forward, learn from a bad experience and make it a good experience. Analyze a recent failure using the questions outlined in this chapter. Number 1, what caused the failure? The situation, someone else, or self? Number 2, was what happened truly a failure or did I just fall short? Number 3, what successes are contained in the failure? Number 4, what can I learn from what happened? Number 5, am I grateful for the experience? Number 6, how can I turn this into a success? Number 7, who can help me with this issue? And number 8, where do I go from here? Take the time to write down your conclusions, what you learned from your analysis, and any action you need to take to make your failure into a success. Share your observations with an advisor who can help you determine if your conclusions are on target. I can think of at least 3 situations I could do this for. Okay, and then here's the recap. Steps to failing forward. Number 1, realize there's one major difference between average people and achieving people. Number 2, learn a new definition of failure. Number 3, remove the you from failure. 4, take action and reduce your fear. 5, change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. 6, don't let the failure from outside get inside you. 7, say goodbye to yesterday. 8, change yourself and your world changes. 9, get over yourself and start giving yourself. 10, find the benefit in every bad experience. 11, if at first you do succeed, try something harder. And 12, learn from a bad experience and make it a good experience. And that's it for today. Thanks for hopping on, Shannon. The next one is increasing your odds for success, and it says avoid the top 10 reasons people fail.
Cool. I'll try to remember to get on tomorrow.
What was that?
I'll try to remember to get on tomorrow too.
Oh, you're fine. I know I've been kind of not consistent with the time, so I'll try to be consistent with the time.
Well, good. Thank you.
Have a good day, Shannon.
You too.